Well, this is the real challenge, right? We've seen just in the last 72 hours the new regime led by the previous vice president, now the president of Venezuela, cracking down on journalists, on any sort of opposition. We really haven't seen many protests or return to the streets, in part because many of those people have left. We have over 8 million Venezuelans who have left and are elsewhere, including Nobel laureate Maria Corina Machado, including the man who stood up for president and by all accounts won the 2024 election. So it's been quite subdued. And the guns, the repressive forces are out on the streets. So what do they need to do? They need to rally, but it's very hard to do given this current situation.
How do you rally if a gun's pointed at your head?
That's the challenge, right?
I mean, Ricardo Hausman cut right to it, right, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess one of the questions, this seems like the Trump administration believes they can exert some influence on this Venezuelan government. How do you think that can play out?
I mean, I think they can exert some influence, but we really haven't heard from the Trump administration an interest in return to democracy, right? Those haven't been the words coming from the president, from the Secretary of State. They've talked about reviving the oil industry. They have talked about, bringing stability to Venezuela, but they haven't really talked about democracy.
I got to get this question in because I need to be rude to Dr. O'Neil. This morning, have you spoken to anyone within the Trump administration of your expertise on Venezuela, Guyana, and everything south?
I have not been speaking to them these last few days.
That's half the problem.
Probably. So, I don't know, open-ended question here. How do you think this plays out? I mean, I'm not sure much is going to change here, I guess, is what a lot of people are starting to come to the conclusion that maybe not a lot's going to change here.
I think there's sort of two scenarios. Okay. One is that, as you say, not a lot changes. We have a new leadership head, but not a regime change. Lots of the other pieces stay in place as they are. Now, oil and others, there may be U.S. players who come in, though it's still kind of a shaky market and the infrastructure is very weak after years and years of sort of degradation. So one is sort of, as you say, stability continuing, new figurehead, but not a lot changed. The other is that, the current president, Delcy Rodríguez, she isn't able to keep all of these forces, right? The various different groups with guns together, and we get sort of a fragmentation, disintegration, and a lot of violence. So instability.
Have you met with Delcy Rodríguez?
I haven't, no.
Because you're the one person I think would. Delcy Rodríguez is like 28, 30 years old. She and her mother take over the Venezuelan embassy in London 1 million years ago as part of the socialist protest. I mean, she's like the real deal within the socialist.
She was chief of staff to Hugo Chavez. I mean, she has a long history with this movement.
She knows all the players.
And she's been a player for a long time.
Right. Shannon O'Neil with us, the Council on Foreign Relations, after Ricardo Hausman of Harvard, to brief Global Wall Street on these events in Venezuela. Paul Sweeney with Dr. O'Neil.
So one of the expectations of the Trump administration is that major global oil companies will go into Venezuela and revive their energy infrastructure, creating more supply in the marketplace, keeping oil energy prices down. But we've spoken to people saying, I'm not so sure, because that's, A, it's a lot of money, and B, it's a long-term investment, which means you're banking on political stability in that country. It's a tough bet to make these days, isn't it?
I think it's a really tough bet to make, and especially if you're a public company, if you have shareholders. What we have seen in Venezuela for the last 25 years is really the solidification, so the consolidation of crony capitalism. So if you're going in there and we're not yet disrupting some of the, the bad players, the corruption, the back and forth. So one is you need hundreds of billions of dollars in investment just to get oil out of the ground and out of the ports, right? There aren't ports that can actually do it now. But two, who are you working with? If we get to a place again in the United States where Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, where other things are being enforced, do you really want to be involved with some of these characters?
Actually, so you didn't talk to the Trump administration. I have no idea what that's about. Have you spoken to Mr. Wirth over at Chevron?
I haven't spoken with him, but I have talked with some of the people in the general energy industry.
What did they ask you?
So they care about what's going to happen. Chevron has been in Venezuela for the long haul, right? And they have gotten exemptions to continue operating. So for them, this is a good turn, right? They won't have to worry so much about these ongoing exemptions for licenses. But I do hear from others who are in this general space, both the oil companies, but also the logistics companies, right? Those who build rigs, those who do other parts. There is a worry, we're only 3 days into this. There's a worry about this stability and really does it last? And, oil companies, others, they make long, multi-year, decades-long bets.
What is the news over the last 72 hours meant for just Latin America in general? I mean, is everybody else looking over their shoulder these days? We think Cuba Cuba, maybe Colombia, and maybe even some other countries?
I mean, this is a real break in U.S. policy writ large for Latin America, for the world, right?
Yep.
We had a policy in the post-World War II period that was really about, if not loved, America wanted to be admired, right? We were a shining city on a hill. And now we're back to gunboat diplomacy, literally, right?
Yep.
Is that we are, the mighty, we are going to use coercive power, and it's going to be transactional. So all of the countries around Venezuela are thinking about that.
The global elite knows sparks are coming off the wall when Elliot Abrams and Shannon O'Neil are going at it at CFR. What is the distinction in the debate between you and Elliot Abrams?
I think the distinction here, and Elliot's one of my great colleagues, so I have a lot of respect for him. I think the distinction.
You say that on air. We know what happens.
We love Elliot. Come on. I think the distinction here is he has worked in the first Trump administration. He worked on Venezuela policy in the first Trump administration.
Did they call Elliot Abrams? I hope so. What's the distinction?
I hope they did too. I think the difference here is probably where we get and how we get there, right? And there is sort of this use of maximal force.
America wants to get to the weekend, right, Paul?
Sure.
Paul's going to Aruba.
Yeah.
Stop the show. Should Paul Sweeney keep his reservation in Aruba?
I think you're good to go now, right? The airspace is back open.
Exactly.
I think you're good to go.
Last weekend was a little dicey.
Yes.
So what's the next step here? I mean, for Venezuela, I'm not sure who's going to make the next step. Is the U.S. going to try to impose some policy here? Is Venezuela going to react to the U.S.? What should we be looking for?
So I'd be looking for whether Delcy Rodríguez actually consolidates power, right? We saw, last night there were videos of a gunfight happening near the presidential palace. Is that just, a one particular thing, a drone that was flying, or is that sort of a bit of a breakdown of these various? I mean, there's 4 or 5 different types of groups and militias that have guns in Venezuela. Up until recently, they've all been working together. We'll see if that continues. So I would be watching what happens on the ground there. And then from Washington, I would be watching, do we see any appetite to go beyond just the snatch and grab that we saw?